It is the difference between protection and impunity, between equality on paper and equality in reality, between rights promised and rights delivered. Around the world, millions of women and girls still face discriminatory laws, structural barriers, and institutional practices that deny them equal protection under the law. Legal systems often fail survivors of gender-based violence, including sexual violence. And we are seeing now with the Epstein papers that are showing things that happened and were reported almost 4 decades ago. So, in addition, economic inequality limits women's ability to seek justice. Harmful social norms silence victims before they even enter the courtroom. If we are serious about equality, we must be serious about justice. The European Union has long positioned itself as a global leader in gender equality and human rights. Our credibility on the international stage depends on the strength, coherence, and ambition of the position we bring to the CSW. That is why the European Parliament, and in particular the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee, the FAM committee that I chair, must be closely and meaningfully involved in shaping European Union's position for this next session. In fact, the FAM committee participates in the CSW every year. We bring legislative expertise and democratic legitimacy. And we bring into the international arena the voices of European citizens, especially women and girls, but also men that are committed, though today there are not not many MEPs here around. Shameful, but never mind, that's normal in our debates. Early and substantive involvement of Parliament in the formulation of the European Union position is not a procedural step. It is a democratic necessity. Enhanced and sustained interinstitutional cooperation between the Parliament, the Presidency and the Commission is essential to ensuring a strong and unified European Union position. An inclusive approach strengthens policy coherence across institutions and legitimacy and increases the effectiveness of our engagement at international level. When we speak with one voice, a voice shaped through today's democratic debate, that voice carries greater weight. Access to justice must be inclusive. It must reach migrant women, women with disabilities, women in rural areas, LGBTQI persons, and those facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination that it is normally the case. Justice cannot be selective. Equality cannot be partial. Our draft recommendation from the Parliament urges the Council to first increase European Union aid, compensate US aid cuts, and ensure sustained funding for United Nations women and gender equality, including sexual and reproductive health and rights. We must stop the backlash. Second, to tackle violence offline and online, including the non-consensual sharing of images, deepfakes, cyber harassment and hate crimes, and push for a stronger European Union and global action. Third, to promote women's leadership, participation and representation in the judiciary. Fourth, to advocate for a consent-based discrimination of rape as a universal standard worldwide. Five, strongly condemn rape and sexual violence as weapons of war and call for international prosecution and accountability. 6, to call for recognizing gender apartheid as a crime against humanity under the Rome Statute using the United Nations definition. As we adopt today our recommendation and prepare for the 70th CSW session, we must send a clear message. The European Union stands firmly for inclusive and equitable legal system. We stand for the elimination of discriminatory laws, policies, and practices. We stand for dismantling structural barriers that prevent women and girls from fully exercising their rights, and we stand against gender backlash. I hope that this House will support the FEM Committee recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to ask Commissioner Kos to take floor for the Commission, please.
Honourable members, powerful women in the rows of this House, also a few men here. The 7th session of the Commission on the Status of Women is essential forum to reflect on key challenges and opportunities for gender equality around the world and drive forwards international efforts to empower all women and girls. Thank you, dear Lina, for a great introduction. I'm pleased that members of this House will again be part of EU delegation this year. This shows our shared commitment to gender equality. In a time of increasing political changes, it is more important than ever to support the Commission on the Status of Women. I want to underline that the multilateral system with the United Nations at its core is a key legal framework for protecting universal human rights. The Commission on the Status of Women is a vital pillar of the UN gender equality architecture, essential for sustaining global agreed commitments. The rights-based approach ensures that gender equality is treated as a legal and political obligation, not a discretionary policy choice. This is crucial, particularly in situations of conflict and crisis. This year's priority topic, access to justice, is vital for gender equality. Equal, unhindered and non-discriminatory access to justice is fundamental to achieve our goals. With the roadmap on women's rights, we show the EU's commitment to the topic. This was made clear in October when the European Parliament, together with all 27 EU member states, endorsed this roadmap. The roadmap is our guiding compass to ensure that we embed the gender lens in all actions. The promotion of women's rights requires a robust, gender-responsive justice system which ensures that women and girls in all their diversity can avail of their rights. It requires addressing the root causes that constrain women's access to justice. These include tackling direct and indirect discrimination and taking measures to ensure the capabilities of all women and girls to take part in public life. At the same time, it is vital to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls, offline and online, including through an accessible, affordable and gender-responsive justice system. Together within the EU, we have made significant steps forward, but we need to continue this path. The next gender equality strategy will build on the roadmap's principles and set out concrete actions for the EU to advance gender equality. We must also defend these principles and values in the global arena, notably at CSW. It is equally important to reflect our commitment to gender equality in our external action as well. Our international partnerships are firmly anchored in the principle of gender equality. Our political and operational roadmap for external action, the third Gender Action Plan, sets a clear objective. At least 85% of our external actions must contribute to gender equality. The EU has also launched major global initiatives to advance this. An example is the Spotlight Initiative, an EU-UN partnership to eliminate violence against women and girls. Since its inception in 2017, this initiative has prevented violence against over 21 million women and girls in 26 countries. It strengthens access to justice for women and girls by enhancing legal frameworks, improving judicial responsiveness, and supporting survivors of gender-based violence. These efforts are more urgent than ever. Today, the world is facing the highest number of active conflicts since 1946. 676 million women are living close to deadly conflict. Civilian casualties among women have quadrupled, and the past few years have witnessed an 87% increase in conflict-related sexual violence. Without access to justice and accountability, violence against women in conflict, including conflict-related sexual violence, will continue with impunity, undermining peace, security, and the rule of law. This is why the EU promotes the integration of these crimes into transitional justice processes to ensure accountability and effective access to justice for survivors. Our commitment to the Women, Peace and Security agenda is deeply connected to this work. Protection, relief and recovery must go hand in hand with access to justice. This is critical for sustainable peace. This is critical for every society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Tagad vārds Eiropas Tautas partijas grupas vārdā Marija Walsh.
Thank you. As we will hear in debate this morning, the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women is holding its 70th session this March. And in its 70 years of existence, we've come some way in the journey of recognising inadequacies in gender equality, but we sure haven't come far enough. As it stands, and hopefully you will hear about this in this morning's debate, it will take us 123 years to achieve gender equality. And as the EPP shadow for this year's opinion on the recommendation to Council on the EU's priorities for the 70th session, it is very important for me to highlight an issue that risks completely backtracking our progress towards gender equality, and that is deepfake technology. The digital world is not separate from the real world. We know that the harms experienced online are very real and deeply damaging. And today, AI-generated deepfakes are being weaponized overwhelmingly against and disproportionately targeted women and young girls. The spread of non-consensual intimate images to discredit women in politics and public life and to intimidate women and young girls into silence is rapidly escalating and doesn't just pose a serious threat, it is a serious threat. Deepfakes erode trust, damage reputations and silent voices. If left unchecked, they risk pushing more women out of public life and undermining democratic participation in itself. And if we in the European Union are really serious about defending gender equality, then our position at the 70th Commission must reflect this reality that women face in 2026. Technology-facilitated gender-based violence must be recognised as a threat to gender equality. This 70th session gives us an opportunity to set the tone for the next decade on policy. And when my colleagues and I travel to New York next month, we will represent a Europe that stands firmly for a digital future where technology empowers women and not exploits them. And I must say, picking up from our FEM chair, less than 30 colleagues are in the chamber right now. We've 720 MEPs. And when women go to make a vote and hear their voice, remember who's showing up for you. Thank you very much.
Paldies. Vārds Sociālistu un Demokrātu grupas vārdā Helēna Fritzone kundzei, lūdzu.
Tack, herr
Mrs. Fritzone for the next.
Tillgång till.
Thank you, President. The access of women and girls to justice is crucial when it comes to exercising their real rights. We need to avoid this just being sort of empty words. When we attend the 70th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, we need to ensure that we can affect change. More and more actors around the world as of anti-gender, anti-sexual rights movement preventing women from participating in economic life. Women find themselves without any form of protection when they're exposed to rape and violence. We've seen that with the Epstein files. Money, networks protect the aggressors, whereas the victims, as far as they're concerned, women and girls, don't have access to justice. It is clear that millionaires have access to all manner of right, can commit all forms of aggression without having to account for their actions. And that is exactly what is happening when there is no justice, when women cannot exercise their rights. Behind these major ban headlines in the Epstein files, there are young girls, young women who've been reduced to silence, whose dignity has been taken away from them, women and girls who've been exploited, and some of them have decided to take their own lives. So we need to act. The EU needs to go to New York with some very clearly defined priorities, strengthening the judicial system, strengthening women's defence organisations, and showing zero tolerance when it comes to those who aggress women and girls. And I'd be very happy indeed to take up this combat together with Lina Galvez.
Please carry on.
The next speaker is Margarita Carrion. President, honourable members, while we're talking about the crisis regarding women's access to justice, that's just a word in many cases. At the meantime, the suggestion is women being prohibited from working, going out into the street or going to work. The fact is, this resolution stresses enormous concern about Europe's ability to show worldwide leadership when it comes to gender equality, and involves an energetic condemnation of anti-gender movements, describing them as being anti-rights, accusing them of rights and undermining lies and undermining democracy. Who are these anti-gender movements? I'm part of those so-called movements. We are women who are members of political parties who's committed to the values of the family, traditional values. According to many of you, we, as patriotic women, conservative women, are those who are depriving women of their rights rather than this being done by Islamic fundamentalism. You talk a lot about the need for inclusion of women in politics. Those aren't necessarily rights, unlike discrimination. Here in this House, the European Parliament, you talk a lot about inclusion, in effect trying to exclude millions of women who voted for us. Those arguments we're using don't hold water. Please show some common sense. Let's all speak together, raise our voices against the real examples of justice which are plaguing women in so many places around the world. Thank you very much.
Tagad vārds Eiropas konservatīvas grupas vārdā Laurence Trochu.
Laurence Trochu for the ECR group. President, colleagues, once again, this Parliament is cloaking itself in moralism, and this is what has always driven left-wing philosophers, resentment, defending an eternal victim, and this is what's happening in the Women's Rights Committee. Once again, this is a statute on the rights of women which leaves no trace of history. It's going to be adopted in the hemicycle, but it really doesn't deal with the exploitation of women through AI and their bodies. It doesn't deal with any of the issues arising from immigration, a veil being imposed on women, forced marriages driven by Islamism. None of that is mentioned. And it denies maternity, it engages in lies about intersectionalism, and it raises abortion to the culmination of politics. So women are under social pressure that they regret today. All these women and girls who are killed by immigrants, all these women who have been lied to by ideology. So I say to young female Europeans, be proud of your femininity. Choose to give life. That's the finest and greatest feminine adventure. And then love our civilization that right from its outset has honoured women like no other civilization has ever done. Thank you.
Yes. Vārds Renew Europe Group's vārdā Lucia.
Thank you. The next speaker on behalf of the Renew Group, Madam Ya.
Have negotiated shall represent the EU's position on gender equality globally at the UN in New York. And do you know what resonates there these days? Why we must be loud and clear about women's rights? Epstein files. They expose how rich and powerful men, often with traditional values, abused girls from across the world, and how their position, influence, and money continue to protect them, sir. The connections reach into Europe, including the highest circles of political and diplomatic circles. And still, we wait for justice. They wait. For years, women and girls have spoken out about sexual abuse, and no one listened. That is the reality of justice for women. Their voices are not enough until messages and photos prove it, and sometimes not even then. On the world stage, EU must be the voice of victims. We must believe them, not shield abusers. Only then will Europe truly stand for justice, for women and for all.
Paldies. Vārds zaļo grupas vārdā Melissa Kamara.
The next speaker is Melissa Kamara for the Greens.
Dear colleagues, the UN session can't be just one further diplomatic exercise at a time when the far right is progressing throughout. It should be an area of resistance, feminist resistance, clear, and one that readily acknowledge where the far right governs, the rights of women and minorities are receding. The far right doesn't defend women. It assigns them to sort of silence, maternity, obedience. It attempts to take control over their bodies, their lives. In Hungary, Viktor Orban has made the birth rate a national priority whilst dismantling the fight against female violence. Meloni is the figure of this sort of Christian mother, and all those who don't fit a model, lesbian, migrant women, fall by the wayside. Donald Trump's USA, Milei's Argentina, exactly the same plans, denying sort of gender violence. The amendments tabled by the far right on the text confirm that offensive. The same transphobic obsessions, sexist, reactionary, instrumentalizing the issue. The session of the CSW should be an area of resistance, should send out a clear political message. Yes, Europe is defending women's rights in all their diversity. Europe is taking clear leadership given the anti-choice backlash, tolerance zero for all types of gender-based violence, recognizing unambiguously the right to consent, access to justice for all victims, and unflinching support to feminist organizations, sure, and legal access to abortion throughout, because everywhere they attempt to control our lives, we feminists are organizing resistance. Women and minorities are standing up to claim their rights and dignity. The fight carries on.
Vārds kreiso grupas vārdā Kathleen Fan.
The next speaker for the left group, Ms. Funchion.
Commend our chair of the FEM committee and also all the colleagues that worked on this report. This year we know the UN Commission on the Status of Women in New York will rightly focus on women's access to justice, a concept that is still far out of reach for millions of women right across the world. Women continue to face obstacles when reporting abuse, harassment and discrimination. When brave women finally speak out, they often face institutional misogyny, endless barriers and further trauma. Abusers weaponise children also, and in too many cases, the judicial system deepens the harm, often leaving women questioning why they sought help or support in the first place. Women cannot even seek mental health support in Ireland at the moment without the risk that their counselling records will be used against them in court. Our report also rightly highlights the need for peace and the importance of supporting UN peacekeeping forces. Justice is not just a legal principle. It is the ability to live in peace, to live without the fear of bombs dropping during the middle of the night. Justice is not having to give birth in a war zone. Justice is being able to walk safely at night without fear of harassment or violence. And really importantly, justice is being believed when you do come forward, not being dismissed, doubted or gaslit. And justice is the right to live a life free from violence. Garmagov.
The next speaker for the US ESN group, Mr. Bostock. Ladies and gentlemen, 80 years ago, the UN Convention for Women's Rights was met for the first time. Their task back then was to set up organizations for women. We describe them today as civil society, sending them out as spies around the world to spread their influence and then to try to fight for so-called women's rights outside the sphere of government. Since then, this organization has become a left-wing mass organization. The next meeting will be the 17th of March. I must say with great regret they've achieved great success over the years. So much success, in fact, that these women are no longer actually in a position to define what a woman is. In Europe, women have equal rights in every area of life. Their rights are equal to those of men. Despite that, however, the European Union continues to roll out gender equality projects, spending 110 million euros over the next 5 years. LGBTQI+, intergender, queer, drag queen, Erasmus programs. Nothing comes at too high a cost. Meanwhile, we are failing to talk about the real problems facing women in Europe: sexual violence against women, mass rapes, forced marriages, gender mutilation, and honour killings. The next conference, or the first conference, was in New York, and this year the European Parliament will once again be sending a delegation. There's no problem, apparently, that last year the UN Special Envoy, Etzelem, was invited by the Greens. Back then, there was a great deal of hypocrisy being voiced regarding the possibility of a gender-neutral definition of Sharia. This year, things have changed. This time, left-wing women from the Women's Rights Committee fear that they won't be allowed to go to the United States for the conference. The US has finally cut access for these women's rights. Real women's policies don't start in women's conferences. Our real policies start by protecting the rights of women and groups, tackling men from archaic cultures or woke left-wing men. Real women's rights policies start when we start taking the rights of women and girls seriously.
Dziękuję bardzo, szanowni państwo. Kwestia dostępu kobiet do wymiaru.
Ladies and gentlemen, the issue of women's access to justice is not an ideological or a theoretical problem. It's a question of whether states are functional when women need protection or whether women are left alone. The 17th CSW is about this responsibility because law only makes sense if it works in practice, if it's understandable, accessible and effective. For too many women, justice is still connected with fear, long procedures and lack of real support, especially for women with disabilities, elderly women, all those living outside of large cities. These are not remote problems, ladies and gentlemen. These are real experiences of many families. The EU should be clear that access to justice, to legal assistance and state institutions cannot depend on your residence, age or financial situation. Cases on violence must be processed quickly by well-prepared justices and prosecutors with victims' safety in mind. There is no equality where there is impunity. This affects domestic violence, sexual violence, but also that violence which happens increasingly online. The EU must be credible also outside, defending the rights of women in the world. The EU defending women's rights defends its own values: safety, security, justice and human dignity. Access to justice is not a privilege. This is a basic function of a state, and today's recommendation says this very clearly. And thank you to the rapporteur and everyone who worked on this report. Thank you.
Next speaker, Joanna Scheuring-Welgus.
Przewodniczący, pani komisarz. Komisja
The Chair, the Commissioner, the CSW is the largest global conference on women's rights in the world. Today, its role is more important than anywhere before, than any time before. The radical right globally threatens women's rights. Donald Trump withdrew the US from over 60 UN organizations, including UN Women. All these organizations that worked for gender equality, for women's health and other issues. The US used to be a pillar of women's organization. Now it withdraws funding and weakens it in the fight against something that should unite us all, fighting against violence against women. This is incredibly saddening, but it is also an opportunity for the EU to become the global leader, not just in the arena of women's rights, but in general of international cooperation. I want to call on the Commissioner, if the CSW in New York is not organized in subsequent years, let's take over. Let's organize it here in Brussels. Let's be a global leader in the fight for women's rights. I'm counting on you. But I'm also calling on everyone here and on the Council to take our recommendations seriously, so that in New York we are there together negotiating our common position in the UN. I also want to call on my colleagues from the right. The fact that you can be here today speaking out is not thanks to some anonymous people. It's thanks to feminists and other brave women that worked for you.
To everybody, would you accept the blue card from Mr. Droze 286? Mr. Droze, no. Thank you. Next speaker, Mathilde Androuet.
Le Parlement européen.
The European Parliament has always invested itself with almost a divine task, telling the world how they should live, and often takes society into directions disconnected from reality with no tangible results for women. It's all about concepts, slogans, progressive issues, but Islam with issues around forced marriage continue to make life difficult for women. And now it's about access of women to justice. Police stations and courts are shutting down, and now we're thinking about sexual violence courts, and everything is happening at the expense of the European taxpayer. Justice, which is praiseworthy, is being used to direct affairs without any justice for the women, 90% of whom suffer violence or rape as they migrate. What are we doing? Women should face the same judges as men. There should be rights, not gender, that count. Let's be clear-eyed about what we need: security, control of our borders, and protection of victims, not this globalist nonsense disconnected from reality, which doesn't help women.
Time is over, so thank you. Next speaker, Asita Kanko.
Beste collega's,
Ladies and gentlemen, access to justice for women and girls is not a new slogan. It's in reality a test of our commitment to values. It's still the case that too many women are faced with a judicial system which does not protect them and does not believe them. This has to change. In March, we'll be meeting in New York with 3 clear messages. No more sexual violence against women, a ban on all types of trafficking of women and sexual and gender mutilation. Discriminatory legislation must disappear, whether it's family law, inheritance law, or participation in public life. As long as women are just treated as second-class citizens, justice will never be equal. Unfortunately, women have a clear knowledge of what happens when law doesn't protect them. Let us use this opportunity to ensure that we can provide practical support, calling for genuine responsibility and accountability. If we want to ensure that women and girls can grow up in safety, access to justice cannot be optional, it has to be a right. Thank you.
Dear Commissioner, dear colleagues, gender stereotypes remain one of the most serious obstacles to women's access to justice. We cannot deny that too often assumptions about women replace facts, and equality before the law exists only on paper. This is clear from the cases of gender-based violence. Around 45% of women who experienced violence did not turn to anyone. Even when cases are reported, convictions remain the exception rather than the rule. Stereotypes affect whether women are believed and whether cases proceed at all. Many violations never reach judicial review. Violations remain legally invisible and impunity persists. This is a systemic failure. Courts cannot develop gender-sensitive practice if they never hear these cases. International law is very clear. States must protect victims and guarantee effective remedies. Therefore, justice systems must not be guided by stereotypes. Access to justice cannot depend on gender. Therefore, we all should support all the measures in implementing this priority. Thank you.
Paldies, vārds Katrīna Langenzipen.
Thank you. And I now give the floor to Kathleen Langenzipen. Colleagues, Commissioner, we're going to New York, and I think this mission is more important than ever because we're talking about the Epstein files, files where over millions of pages it is revealed how mostly men have established a network of rich, well-heeled, well-known men who have humiliated and raped and exploited women and girls. And people don't believe it. The proof is there, but people don't believe it. Some 20 years ago, 15, 16-year-olds went to the police. They weren't believed. Well, why didn't you report him? That's very often the argument that is trotted out. And I think we've seen for ourselves what happens with the Epstein files when obstacles are put in people's way, and it's quite clear how sort of 15, 16-year-old girls aren't believed, aren't taken seriously. What kind of a sign is that? When it's so obvious, people tend not to believe it. So we're travelling to New York, and we hope there to be able to fight for the rights of victims.
Langenzipen, colleague Langenzipen, can I?
Will you accept a blue card?
Yeah, you have a blue card, but from Mr. Droze, 286. No. So, next speaker, Elena Kontora.
Thank you, President, Madam Commissioner. The 70th Convention of the Rights of Women is taking place in a period when women's rights are on the decline across Europe. Access to the legal system is a problem for millions of women, and they don't have access to justice. Most women do not even report violence in third countries and in Europe in the same way. We must step up access to justice for victims to protect them and children, because women's rights also apply to parenthood. This must be ruled on by specialised courts with the support of child psychologists. There must be universal access and full access for women to the justice system, and we must remove all obstacles that stand in the way of examining cases and make women victims a second time over. All women must have access across the world.
Sorry.
Thank you. There are a lot of resolutions, there's a lot of discussion. I've got 30 years of legal experience, and I don't think what's happening in this hemicycle represents that. For 30 years, I've tried to reach out to people, to women, with what's facing them. There have been many legal rulings in which judges have faced women who've faced unimaginable problems, and women have faced violence, and some have died. And for numerous years, there have been cases where really they've been pursuing their special line of thinking. You've got girls who've been sold for their virginity at the age of 10 or 11. You've got cases like Epstein. You've not seen action taken against the ministers and dignitaries who've been involved in these terrible crimes of paedophilia, cannibalism. There's ongoing violence against women.
Unequal.
Panie Przewodniczący.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, first I'd like to thank very much everyone who worked on this important file. Recently in Poland we've been reminded of a story of a Silesian doctor, Jolanta Badowska-Król, who in the 1970s was talking about children in her region being born sick because the region was polluted by the industry. She did not get support. She was pressured, silenced, and removed from her job. And this is not just an issue of the past. It's a story of a woman who took responsibility when the system failed. Today, many women still bear this double burden: professional work and unpaid care work. Many are victims of violence. Many earn less than men at the same jobs. I am thinking about women who today in Poland are still fighting for equal rights and equal pay for equal work, for respect and justice. I'm thinking about women in the Ukraine who every day are in fear for their own and their children's lives. We are there for you. We will always support you. Ladies and gentlemen, if Europe is to be credible, it has to act, not just declare. Improving women's rights, it's not a separate issue, it's a measure of the quality of our democracy. Thank you.
Alessandra Moretti.
Thank you. I give the floor to Mrs. Moretti.
Nel 2025 la Corte Europea.
In 2025, the European Court of Human Rights sentenced Cyprus because in a case of sort of group rape, rather than ascertaining the absence of consent on the part of the victims, they looked at the past sexual activities of the woman, calling into question her credibility and saying that she was responsible for the violence she suffered. That is called secondary victimization, and that is happening in Europe today. It's a disgrace that women are still afraid of the courtroom, and yet parliamentarians are feeding a stereotypical vision of women where women are the victim and they have to prove that they didn't actually give too much consent. Unless the rules change, women will not have access to justice because women still today continue not to be believed. We need specialized tribunals on gender violence, specialized training for lawyers, judges, enforcement authorities, and we need to abide by the principle of self-determination. If women have to defend themselves against the judicial system, then our democracies are fragile indeed. Thank you.
Sebastian Kraskongam.
Ja, hartelijk bedankt. Thank you, President. The European Union is going to the United Nations to talk about the status of women. What do they mean by this? Rainbow flags and special lists of 21-year-old Trent students. This goes to show this is part of the welfare cancer of society. Everything these days boils down to inclusion, but inclusion should apply to our women, inclusive and safe streets, inclusive protection from rape, violence and death. So the fact is we have a choice whether we accept all these dangerous people for women being imported to Europe. And we shouldn't be talking about gender equality, drinking Prosecco in the United States. Women want security, safety. The police shouldn't be held back by political correctness. We need safe, secure borders. The fact is the police should be able to arrest the real monsters. We've seen these mass murders, mass rapists. We can't prevent this with gender quotas at the border. So let's roll all these rules back. Let's keep our good borders secure.
Blue card from Madame Garcia Hermida van der Wal from number 32, please. Blue card accepted.
Thank you, Chair. Bedankt, meneer.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. Thank you for referring to me in your contribution. You talked about violence, the need to protect people against death. Would you explain to us why your party and your party leader was opposed to legislation to prevent feminicide and calls to increase funding for it? Why did he vote against that? Thank you.
Uitgeklapt. Hartelijk bedankt.
Have you finished applauding? Madam, we can't just leave the tap open. What about Syrians? We've heard the fact that so many of them are responsible for raping native Dutch women, 20 times more frequently for Somalians. So we have an action plan for feminicide. That's something we support. We have to tackle this at its root. And the root problem is this import of barbarians, which means that women are no longer safe in our society. And we have these hysterical women who reject any form of debate about this. We have these calls for blue cards. This is simply unbelievable.
You still continue. There is a colleague crash. We continue with Madame. Yeah.
Volgens het wetenschappelijk onderzoek.
According to scientific research in data centers in the Netherlands, asylum seekers are less frequently suspects of sexual violence in comparison with the comparable groups of Dutch people, in comparison with the Dutch population as a whole. You're lying, you know it. You are here disseminating hate. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Ik schaam me hooguit voor het hysterische applaus.
I'm ashamed, I must say, for this hysterical applause in the chamber. You're talking about science. Everybody on the left in this house says that men can have children. How can you come and start talking to me about science? Only women can have children. You're talking about the need to protect women. What on earth are you going on about? Please don't start talking to me about science, madam.
Thank you, colleagues. We continue with Beatrice Team-Green. The floor is yours.
Jag vill ställa en enkel fråga. Känner sig...
I want to ask a very simple question. Do the women in Europe feel safe on public transport or when they're out and about, or if they're living in old people's homes? No, there are numerous attacks that take place on women, young women and girls in Sweden, and it's explained away as socio-economic differences or abstract theories about the gender power balance. But women don't want to hear that. People are closing their eyes to the facts. Migrants are overrepresented when it's a question of violence against women. For women to feel safer, these perpetrators of violence must be put in prison. And moreover, we need a very restrictive migration policy. We can't deal with it as in Spain, where 500,000 illegal migrants are being taken in.
Thank you. I give the floor to Mr. Kelleher.
Debate on the migration package, people on the right of this House stood up and repeatedly claimed that asylum seekers are a grave danger to women and girls in our communities, and we just heard it again this morning. Yet the facts remain that women are most likely to be attacked by someone in their own family. To put this in context, while 60% of female homicides are committed by their partner or family, this is the case for 11% of male homicides. The people who are trying to stoke fear and distrust towards asylum seekers and migrants are the same people who will vote today to water down the Parliament's priorities for the 70th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. They will try to water down calls to ensure better access to the judicial system. They will try to water down ensuring greater representation of women in the judicial system. They will try to deny calls to introduce a consent-based definition of rape. I call on my colleagues in this House and to the Member State governments not to let this narrative take hold. Let us send out a very clear and strong message that women's rights are enforceable. In fact, they should be non-negotiable. But tragically, inside in this House, we have people who are willing to sell out and undermine half the population of this globe and undermine their rights. Let you be heard, I say to the women, you will be believed and you will have access to justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Tilly Metz.
Thank you very much. We must be serious about gender equality. It is a fundamental principle of the European Union, and I want to believe it is a principle we all share. Being serious about gender equality also means being serious about health of half of the population. Universal access to sexual and reproductive health care, access to safe abortion without discrimination and without exceptions is key. Yet today's health care and medicine are not delivering for women. Lesbian and trans women face discrimination in care. Refugee women struggle to access even basic services. Health research excluded pregnant women. This means delayed diagnosis, worse health and preventable deaths. Our European and global commitments must include all women in all their diversity. Only then we can ensure social justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Carolina Morace.
Presidente, colleghi.
President, colleagues, for millions of women around the world, justice remains only on paper. It's inaccessible for those who can't afford a lawyer, who live in judicial systems that are influenced by gender stereotypes, for those who suffer violence and are not believed, for those who don't have access to fundamental rights, such as sexual and reproductive health rights. If we really want to talk about access to justice, then I think it's here we need to start. Without rights, there is no justice. That means we need to defend safe and legal abortion as a human right, adopting a definition of rape which is based on the absence of consent, guaranteeing adequate services for the victims of violence. In a general context which is marked by war and democratic backsliding, the EU has to decide what camp it is in, what side it's on, and I hope it'll choose the right one: equality and the dignity of women. When it comes to women on the right, you can ally yourselves with those who wish to limit rights, but there should be no illusions when rights are diminished. There is no political distinction.
Mr. Kartheiser, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Protégeant.
Thank you, President. Protecting women from feminism. The purpose of any policy for women should be based on their difference. Denying the specific nature of the feminine condition is the basis for an unhealthy ideology. Being women is not a choice, it's biological. Women should be given the marvellous possibility of becoming mothers. This should ensure that we protect their health so that they're in a position to protect the traditional family. Traditional families are the future of Europe. Family and society policy should encourage maternity so as to give a new light of hope to our ageing population. Having children is a promise for the future. Women are also faced with risks of the odious exploitation of surrogacy, a risk to their security and a risk when it comes to access to sport. In Luxembourg, the government has actually tried to do away with intimacy for women by abolishing separate toilets. Let's protect women from such dangerous, mad projects.
Thank you very much. And I give the floor to Madam Esteras Ferragut.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. As you know, equality is one of the fundamental principles of the Union, and women's rights are, without doubt, a prerequisite for development, reduction of poverty, and the building of peaceful, prosperous and sustainable societies. Access to justice is enshrined in international law and the Charter of Fundamental Rights. It's clear that this is vital for the rule of law and democracy. Access for women to justice must be accessible. It's a complex procedure. There are numerous obstacles because of gender stereotyping, discrimination, inequality economically, secondary victimization, a lack of free assistance, and this is all particularly relevant for vulnerable women, particularly those with disabilities, where the legal system is very hard to access. Effective access to justice must be provided with free legal assistance, specialised courts to deal with violence against women, and a training programme for judges and prosecutors. and we must fight violence directed against women and girls, and we must follow the roadmap of Istanbul and ensure effective, genuine participation of women in all sectors and decision-making. We must show global leadership, and for that, without access to justice, there's no democracy or equality, and that's why I would like us to speak with one voice with you all in Europe and to show that leadership first and foremost. Thank you.
Maria Neuchel kon zijn.
Thank you, and I give the floor to Maria Neuchel. Dear Commissioner, comrades, those who are listening to us, at the seventh session of the CSW, we want to ensure that Europe's voice is heard. Once a year for 2 weeks at the headquarters of the UN, there is the meeting of women who meet to talk about women's rights. But this time it's going to be different, because this time traveling to the US is going to be jeopardized. It's not open to all. Your telephones are going to be looked at. Those who are in the streets wanting to attend the conference, they aren't safe. There are men and women who unjustly are being imprisoned, who are not released from prison. It's quite clear that the USA is no longer safe for the Commission on the Status of Women. The UN is no longer a safe place when it comes to bringing women together, because we see more and more people wishing to take over power. It's worrying when we don't have a sort of a safe meeting place for meetings such as this. So I appeal to the Commissioner to think about this, whether the next meeting shouldn't indeed take place in Europe, a place where women and all wishing to attend that conference will feel safe.
Once again, the European Parliament is going with the woke ideology. But let's try to be a little bit more fact-based. If you're worried about crimes being committed against women, you should also be worried about mass immigration. 1 of 3 murders on women are committed either by immigrants or their descendants. And when you look at the rape statistics, things look even worse. Somalian men in Denmark are convicted 9 times more than the average of rape in Denmark. But if you come from Palestine, it's only 15 times more than the Danish average. These are facts. And it's also a fact that you can identify as whatever you want, but that there only are 2 biological sexes, and that we shouldn't create a societal model based on weird ideologies. We should talk about equal opportunities. But I don't understand why the European Parliament is not worried about a lack of conscription for women across European countries, why women don't go to war, and why don't we look at the high death rates across Europe. The problem is that blind hatred and ideology that is dominating this debate.
Freeze, 31, you will take it, yeah, please.
Will this become the day where you declare yourself a feminist and a fighter for women's rights, or are you just trying to use mine and many other female politicians' gender as an excuse to spread hatred? It excites me to hear that you are worried about women's rights. If you really want to fight for female victims of rape, would you then start by approving a consent-based rape legislation all across Europe? Because that would really make a huge difference for all the thousands of women across Europe today who face a brick wall when they try to get help. Cyril, you and the radical left are the main responsible party for the mass immigration into Denmark. You are the reason that so many women have died in the latest years, and it is your fault that rape statistics are full of immigrants. So it is a bit weird for me to hear that those of us who fight for harsher punishments for rape and these kinds of crimes, we are to be blamed by the radical left for this. I would love to send the colleague the relevant data if she needs it. We're looking at rape and violence against women, and you have voted against all the initiatives that we have proposed. That means that you are on the side of the perpetrators and not the victims. We've seen it again and again, and it appears to just keep going. Okay, I have another question. The fact is that you didn't even answer my question whether you would support a consent-based rape regulation and do more to support the victims who are victims of violations. Please answer my question. Well, in Denmark, we have a consent-based rape legislation, and that hasn't really made any difference for the victims. The only thing that helped was harsher penalties and sanctions against the perpetrators, so that we don't experience people being released just months after the crimes being committed. And the reason that things look so terrible is because we've had these soft, useless politicians who haven't been able to actually punish the perpetrators of the terrible crimes. And we can see it inside the Danish parliament, that every time we try to increase punishments and sanctions, you're always talking about the rights of the perpetrators. You fight against the expulsion of criminal foreigners, and you always seem to have other priorities than the right of women to live safely in Denmark and other European countries.
30 seconds, so thank you. Next speaker, Lara Magoni.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. The work which underpins access to justice for women involves increased participation for women in public life. However, this has become an empty ideological charter. We talk about gender, we don't talk about surrogacy, 50-50 parity, the LGBTO rights, the need to have female judges to fight against gender violence. All of this, however, is theoretical. We don't have a practical approach to deal with everyday problems when it comes to maternity and family, practical support for those who are subjected to violence. There's no reference here to the women who are oppressed in countries under Sharia law. Women's rights are trampled underfoot every day in those countries. There's no freedom for these women in regimes which simply disregard any principles of justice. We don't need ideological manifestos to defend women. We need a Europe which acts rather than just talking about it. We have to focus on reality, not theories. We have to guarantee protection, tangible support and real rights.
Thank you. Valérie Devaux.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. As we get closer to the session of the CSW, I think this report is sending out a very clear political signal, that of a European Union that wishes to remain coherent when it comes to its values and what it does in the outside world. We need to look reality in the face. Forced marriage, sexual violence, female mutilation. These violences continue around the world. They're serious human rights violations, and they call for a firm response, and that response involves access to justice, support for protection, training of the professionals concerned, but also the promotion of genuine equality. Parity is not a luxury. It is a factor that makes for democracy and enables the voice of women to be taken on board. It's an ambitious approach, but it's one that we need to defend as women's rights are receding throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Mrs. Estrella Galan has the floor. Thank you. Women across the world are having their rights and real advances guaranteed by the UN. It's a space for feminist resistance, whereas Trump wants to replace the UN with a private group. He doesn't just want to be president of that for life, but he wants to charge $1 billion admission fee. This is not a step towards peace, as he says. It's just the godfather role, like Corleone. He wants to be the capo dei capi, where the others are Netanyahu and so on. A group of men ruling the world based on machismo. And women are supporting the world, bearing the world up. We can't have a better world without any of us. The chair of the UN General Assembly spelt it out loud and clear, asking for the EU to defend the UN. Commissioner, we ask you to listen to our petition, because this bowing on the UN would be to kowtow to Trump's macabre plan. The world is better with women on board. And I'm sorry, President, but a motion of order. A motion of order.
You don't have a floor no more. I have to be fair to everybody, so it is my responsibility. Colleague, please, please leave. Thank you very much. Thank you, it was very kind. Isabella Wieseler Lima would be the next speaker.
La Commission de la condition de la femme des Nations Unies s'apprête.
The United Nations Commission for the Rights of Women is about to organise its 70th session against a very difficult backdrop. The fact is, mandates for this commission and other UN bodies mean that there's less and less commitment to women's rights, accompanied by growing financial pressure on those bodies. The 70th session of the CSW will be focusing on the right of women and girls to justice. Although equal access to justice is a fundamental principle in international law, women are still faced with a series of structural obstacles which prevent their rights being enjoyed. So the United Nations conference should be an opportunity for the European Union to underline once again its strong commitment to equal rights for men and women at a time when we continue to defend diversity, equality and inclusion while protecting the mandate of the United Nations CSW. This report also underlines the need to guarantee real and practical access to justice for women and girls. This includes access to legal aid, clear rights and information for the victims. There should also be specific training in the judiciary when it comes to gender-related actions. The European Parliament also calls for stronger action against online violence against women and girls. We should have a consent-based definition of rape and condemnation of the use of sexual violence as a political or war weapon. Thank you.
Elizabeth Grossman.
Thank you. And now Mrs. Elizabeth Grossman has the floor.
Präsident, Frau Kommissar.
President, Commissioner, I'd like to thank Linda Gavis for this very sort of committed report. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a theme that seeks to promote full participation of women and girls in public life and the fight against violence against women and girls. It's more topical than ever if you look at what's happening to women who are active in public life, whether they be content creators, human rights activists, journalists. 7 out of 10 women are experiencing digital violence, messages of hate through messenger services, hatred sort of postings, people calling for sort of violence, cyber bullying, but making publicly available private information, but with a view to or calling for physical violence against women. And of course, women feel that they have no protection and very often withdraw from the public arena. And that's something that we shouldn't permit. We need to do all we can so that acts such as these are subject of a criminal prosecution. And that is something that we need to state quite clearly in the USA and the wider world.
Thank you, President. Ladies and gentlemen, women and girls should be able to enjoy safety, equal opportunities and protection against violence. That goes without saying. In this report, however, other points are made. We have calls for gender identity to be officially recognised and for trans women to be recognised as full women. At the same time, it's accompanied by calls for action against movements which don't support gender ideology. Ladies and gentlemen, in a democracy, we're entitled to have different opinions. I should be entitled to say that trans women are not biological women and shouldn't be entitled to the same rights. By saying that doesn't make me an extremist. If we start punishing people for deviant opinions, we're opening the door for censorship. Moreover, I don't believe that public funding, and the EU intends to spend billions of euros on all sorts of NGOs in coming years, those shouldn't be allowed to impose ideologies on member states or third countries. This undermines support for genuine women's rights. We have to protect our women. We have to protect freedom of speech. Those are our priorities.
Yes, Bert-Jan Ruijsen-Kongam.
Thank you. And now Bert-Jan Ruijsen.
Thank you, President.
ladies and gentlemen. Although I'm not a member of the Women's Rights Committee, it was important for me to take part in this essential debate. Fortunately, many women have good lives, but there are also many women for whom that's absolutely not the case. We see examples of human trafficking, exploitation in prostitution and in the field of surrogacy. In today's resolution, I see no reference to this. There's lots of attention for gender equality, as if the only thing which matters in life is women having careers. And of course, the old standing calls for making abortion a human right, as though women had and mothers had no duty of care for unborn life. President, we have to take a robust approach to tackling human trafficking. We have to ban surrogacy, and we have to ensure that we have measures which protect mothers and unborn children. When it comes to gender equality, however, I would suggest we adopt a slightly more relaxed approach. Let's promote the freedom of choice. Women who choose to devote their lives to their family and not have a paid employment deserve our respect.
Thank you, Sigrid Fries.
I struggle to understand why we're not more angry. Maybe it's because as women we are told to smile more. But it's 2026. Women are done waiting politely for rights that should be the basic, should be the bare minimum. The fight for women doesn't stop at Europe's border. In the US, it seems that there's been put more weight towards the emails of a dead man rather than the testimonies of hundreds and hundreds of living women. When women tell similar stories, the scandal is not their testimony. The scandal is our failure to listen. In Iran, women are rising and they're losing. They're risking their life for simply existing. We must stand by them, sister to sister, shoulder to shoulder. Women don't need more waiting. Women need global action, global leadership. We are done with empty promises. It's 2026. It's time to prove to the next generation of women that we were the ones who acted when it really mattered.
Paldies. Vārds Sunčana Glavaka kundzei, lūdzu.
Thank you. And now, Ms.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ladies and gentlemen, 30 years after the Beijing Declaration, we cannot talk about the lack of a framework or international obligation. What is a problem is the lack of implementation. Women's rights remain just pieces of paper. What does the EU need to do? It needs to act decisively. Women's rights shouldn't be a question of ideology, but that is what we hear in this hemicycle today, and we need to react. This is further polarizing our societies. One of the colleagues said that women are hysterical. This is a stereotype I thought I would never hear in the political arena. Not anymore. Women are hysterical and men are men are strong. Well, women can be strong and have a strong temperament. Please, male colleagues, mind your language, mind what you're saying, because this debate should not include the words that I hear today. The digital world, online harassment and hate speech and the abuse of private data is something that is further endangering women's rights. This is something we should talk about. We should protect women offline and online. Violence against women has a new dimension. If we don't recognize this as a true threat to security and equality, we are ignoring the real issue. Women's rights are the foundation of equitable society. That is the message that we need to promote.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Mrs. Marit May.
Ensuring and strengthening access to justice for all girls and women. That's the topic of this year's Commission on the Status of Women. Because justice to all is not a given. Too often women and girls face hurdles accessing justice systems, and they are not taken seriously. This takes place everywhere. In my country, the Netherlands, only 15% of women that experience rape or sexual assault go to the police, and convictions are very rare. In situations of conflict and war, this is even worse. Sexual violence and rape are used as a weapon of war. Lives of women and girls are devastated and are often the lives of their communities. When justice does not prevail, it means that impunity thrives and perpetrators go free. The EU must promote sexual and reproductive health and rights and bodily autonomy in its external policies, but also in the European Union. Improving the status of women should be a concern for all of us. Thank you.
Paldies. Vārds Kristiāna Terheša kungam, lūdzu.
Thank you, Christian Teresh.
Dragi colegi, solicit.
Colleagues, the resolution calls for all to be addressed as women, and it talks about physical and other protections for all women, even those self-defining, but chromosomes and anatomy, reproductive apparatus define what a woman is, not a self-declaration. That's what makes a man or a woman a woman. These are distinct biologies that should be recognised in the statutes. A woman should be unambiguously defined, and if not, then protection of women's rights is going to become ineffective. A man recognised as a woman would create an exception in that law. How could they be protected? The only option for the protection of women is to vote against this aberrant report.
Promoting this madness that a trans woman is a woman in countries where you are going on behalf of the EU, because you're just pushing all these countries in the arms of Putin. To be clear, trans women are men.
Thank you, colleague. So, the next speaker, Jagna Marculaitis Valcak.
Szanowny panie.
The Chair, Commissioner, women's rights are human rights. It seems a cliché, but in the 21st century we still have to defend this basic truth. In many parts of the world, women do not have equal opportunities. Girls are excluded from education and women are eliminated from healthcare. Many of them experience period poverty, even in Europe. Women who want to interrupt their pregnancy for any reason are forced to seek help outside of their country. Access to justice is a real opportunity to defend your rights. The right to information, protection from violence, and professional legal assistance. Without that, we cannot really talk about true security at home, at work, or in public. Even in states with well-developed social systems, inequalities are still visible. Women make less money and are less likely to occupy top positions in politics or in business because they are the ones who bear the cost of maternity and care for the family members. My call is clear. Women have to have real access to justice, to security, and the right to decide about their lives and their health. This is an issue of autonomy, dignity, and basic human rights. And speaking of fundamental rights, it's not just about declarations. We need to have real guarantees of equality.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Mr. Veshligai.
Commissioner, colleagues, the 70th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women is not a routine diplomacy act. It is a test of our credibility. Today, in 2026, 1 in 3 women in the world experiences physical or sexual violence. There is still around a 20% salary gap between men and women, and more than 700 women die of pregnancy and labor-related deaths in the world every day. It is a decades-long global injustice. For 70 years, the United Nations have been building international standards for the protection of women. If we weaken the system right now, we will weaken the millions of women depending on that protection. The Donald Trump administration keeps undermining the significance of the UN, undermining reproductive rights. It keeps cutting funding of programs for women's health and relativizing gender equality. That is why the EU must clearly and without compromise secure the funding of UN programs and oppose anti-gender movements around the world. When women's rights are denied, democracy is threatened at its core. Europe must show it will not keep silent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rafovich.
Chers collègues,
colleagues, everywhere our rights are threatened and our sort of universal fight for equality is trampled underfoot by the reactions of the fundamentalists. The territory of Donald Trump, there's a will to ban ban abortion, transsexualism, but the ICE population is terrifying the population and tracking down those they deem undesirable. Let's say loud and clear, ICE out in the US, but also in the EU, where ICE may be present for the Winter Olympics. René Good should remain in everyone's memory. Women, Life, Liberty, that movement is being crushed underfoot in Iran as I speak, with people being sort of assassinated, or Nadia, the co-producer of a film produced in Cannes, imprisoned. In order, or when we go to the UN session, we shouldn't forget any victim. We need to stand up to the ogres who feel that they are all powerful. We need to stand up for the dignified life, the life of all, from the US to Tehran. We should ban any reactionary position. We need to defend Europe, our values and our honor.
Would you accept a blue card, colleague? Would you accept from Madame Trochu, 600? Would you accept? Madame Trochu, 600, please.
Préoccupé des hommes qui se disent être des femmes, mais
you seem to be worried about men who say that they're women, but what are you doing for the women who are standing up to the Islamist patriarchate and those who suffer barbaric acts such as excision, polygamy, or sexual slavery? I'd like to hear your views on that.
Pour nous, madame.
Well, for us, it's clear a trans woman is a woman, yes. But we, unlike you, we are defending democracy. We are the opponents of all those who are reactionary, the fundamentalists. You hear within the parliament, the sort of mouthpiece for Putin, Trump, Orban. We're not going to take any lessons from you. We defend women. We here take on the legacy of Gisèle Halimi, Simone Weil, and all those who have fought reactionary fundamentalists, religious fundamentalists.
Next speaker, Matthias Nemetz.
Dear colleagues, gender equality is not a slogan. It is a core European value and condition for the real democracy. The UN, the EU, in the UN, the EU must speak with a clear voice. Women's rights are human rights, and access to justice is essential. Too many women and girls still face laws and systems that dub them and that fail to protect them. We must invest more in fair and gender-sensitive justice. And yes, we also need more women in the legal system at all levels, because representation changes perspectives and builds trust for victims seeking justice. The Epstein scandal exposed how wealth and power can shield abusers and silence victims. This is exactly why strong, independent and gender-aware justice matter. This is exactly why we have to fight for. Initiative like My Voice, My Choice reminds us that women demand agency over their bodies and their lives. The EU must lead in this fight so that every woman and every girl can seek justice without fear and decide over her own body, because a union of values must deliver justice also in practice. Thank you so much.
Colleague Nemetz, would you accept blue card from... No, you will not accept. No, it's not you. So it's not you. No. It's Mr. Gradualis, but you will not accept. So, colleague, we are closing this part of our debate, and we are going to catch the eye. And I have 5 names on my list, and Vytenis Povilas Andrukaitis will be the first.
Dėkoju pirmininkė.
Thank you, Mr. President. Commissioner Kos, Madam Rapporteur Galvez, thank you very much. All main tasks have been formulated very well. The 70th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women should continue our work, should convey those ideas which have been voiced by progressive women. We should speak about reproductive rights, all other rights. We should seek to implement those rights. It hurts me to know that in some member states, even in constitutions, discrimination is included as far as women's rights are concerned. We should continue working with those member states which continue violating women's rights, even by virtue of their constitutions. We should also understand that we've heard a lot of reactionist ideas, and it is a very good example that some people don't understand history.
So what's wrong, please? On which point? What does it mean on this point? On catch the eye procedure?
Colleagues, as we are having this debate now, there is a banner outside of this room sponsored by a member of this House from ECR that is taking away, that is defending, that's really attacking women's rights to their own body. I demand...
Colleague, it's your interpretation. Please take a seat. Please take a seat. We continue with the catch-eye procedure. Sebastian Timkinen.
Arvoisa puhemies.
President, these recommendations are marketed as promoting women's rights, but in reality, this is a left-wing ideological proclamation. It is not based on biological reality, but on gender ideology. It does not defend women. It actually dismantles their rights. When a woman is defined as an emotional experience and not a biological reality, the foundation on which the protection of women as a whole is built disappears completely. And the most worrying thing in this is that we do not dare name the real threat to women. Sharia law-based systems that systematically and transparently deny women's rights. Women's rights do not need more ideology. They need the courage to defend biological reality, family, and universal freedoms everywhere. Thank you.
The next speaker, Cynthia Nimurkhu.
President, Commissioner, thank you very much. As we're approaching the 70th session of the UN Commission on the Status of Women next month, we need to be honest. The international community is failing women and girls on nearly every measure of gender equality under the 2030 Agenda. Violence against women remains pervasive, it goes unpunished, and it's increasing. Economic inequality has barely shifted, and access to justice is still not guaranteed. And crises and conflict are there. When laws do not protect and when courts remain out of reach, equality becomes an empty promise. We cannot accept this lack of an agreed definition of rape across all of the member states. How can a woman have legal protection in one country but be denied justice in another? I strongly endorse the FAM Committee's leadership in shaping the EU's position for the CSW70. We have to need to continue our work.
Next speaker, Siegfried Frank Drosen.
Herr Vorsitzender, vielen Dank.
Thank you. President. The President interrupt.
Procedure currently. So what? Please refer to the rules. Michael?
Oh, now it works. Are no political banners allowed in front of plenary or inside of plenary. This rule accounts to everyone, no matter what political opinion you have, and the ushers have confiscated the banner. Please, President, respect our rules. It's not a question of political opinion. This rule accounts for everyone here in the House, so just don't say, but this is just your opinion. This is the rules, and the rules have been executed by the ushers.
Thank you, colleague. I fully follow the rules because it's inside of hemicycle says rules, not outside of hemicycle. Thank you very much. We continue. I just got the consultations from our experts, and I follow the suggestions according to the rules. Thank you very much. Next speaker, Siegfried Frank Drose.
Ja, vielen Dank. Ich würde gerne etwas.
Thank you. I would just like to contribute to clarification of this debate. Rapporteur, I've been here since the very beginning of the debate. It's not always easy, I must say, but I'd like to ask you to recognize something. This is a very important debate for you, and we have just one person or nobody from the European Council. Perhaps you could find out about that regrettable absence. We've had several references to the Epstein files. In this disappointing debate, we've had no reference to the fact that one of the prime suspects in that case is a woman, someone of your own gender. At the same time, we have numerous attacks against Europeans carried out by migrants. Mainly women are being attacked. That's something else you don't mention. You talk a lot about feminicide, but we have a fundamental problem in Europe with migranticide, the killing of migrants. When it comes to right-wing forces, in particular so-called far-right forces, we profess unstinting support for women and their rights. I'd like you to recognize that, please.
Chers collègues, je partage la nécessité.
Colleagues, I share this need to fight for the rights of women, but the method used shows its limits, and we observed that yesterday. Lina Galvez, you said that women must assume their responsibility in the home, and that's right. Women bring up boys. We have a major role to play. Why don't we talk about that role? Equality of respect is built from childhood. Positive discrimination raises questions. If women exceed 50% in positions of responsibility, will you drive them out? As Barack Obama said, it's a counterproductive approach. We regret the attendance of so few men here. Let's ask questions about the way this campaign is being fought. As a mother and wife, I reject this sterile position. Let's find a way of bringing men on board in this campaign. I think that's also essential. Thank you.
We are closing KHI procedure, and now I would like to ask to take floor for the Commission. Commissioner Kos, floor is yours. There is no more rules of procedure. I gave floor to the Commissioner.
Honourable members, the upcoming session of the Commission on the Status of Women comes at a time of global challenges. In today's complex geopolitical landscape marked by a growing backlash against gender equality, the EU's unwavering commitment to advance women's rights is more crucial than ever. Access to justice and gender equality are intrinsically linked. When women have access to justice, they can make use of their rights to be empowered and protected against discrimination and violence, both in the EU and beyond. This is also crucial in crisis situations, conflicts and post-conflict. The European Commission takes its role in ensuring gender-responsive access to justice through the many initiatives to advance gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Our work is guided by and aligns with that of the European Parliament, including the resolution with recommendations for CSW 70 that we discussed today. The upcoming 17th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women provides an opportunity to reinforce the international community's commitment to ensuring and strengthening access to justice for all women and girls. We need to accelerate progress on these commitments, both within the EU and globally, especially at these times. We must strengthen gender-responsive leadership, investments and institutions, including the judicial systems. I thank you for your commitment and support, especially to you, powerful women, to advance gender equality and to deliver together in the spirit of the Union of Equality.
Thank you very much. And now I will give the floor to the rapporteur, Lina Galvez, to close the debate, please. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you, colleagues, for your support and commitment. Thank you very much, Commissioner Kos. Thank you for your commitment. I hope you support us in front of the Council in order we bring a strong, united position from the European Union, because the European Parliament is not a symbolic participant. We have championed ambitious standards to combat gender-based violence, including sexual violence, now also digital violence as well, eliminate all discrimination, strengthen victims' rights, promote economic independence for women, sexual and reproductive health rights, and also access to justice, that today it is more important than ever as we are seeing what is happening with the Epstein files. United States justice and institutions choose not to believe the victims. So why it is so important we advance here in Europe in a consent-based definition of rape. We need to believe the victims. And regarding the ones against women's rights and gender equality, I would like to remind you that contrary to what you have been saying, that equality is an idea coming from abroad, just please read, study. It's a healthy practice. I really promise. Because these ideas of equality were born here in Europe, are enshrined in our treaties, are part of our fundamental values. And please, please, please stop using women's rights. Stop instrumentalizing gender equality for other ends that are racist and Islamophobia. Please fight for women's rights and for gender equality. And just to finish, I was complaining before when this debate started that there were not many MEPs, colleagues, male MEPs, colleagues for the debate. However, after listening that we are just women only serve for being mothers, for maternity, so no human beings in ourselves. After listening us to be called hysteric twice, probably, and even we've been accused going to New York to take a Prosecco. Probably the colleague just said that, just escaped after talking. Probably he's the one taking a Prosecco. So please, please don't instrumentalize our fight, because it's a very serious fight. So vote in favor of our position of this resolution. Bring the CSW to Europe.
Thank you very much.
And please fight really for human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The debate is closed and the vote will be held today. And then I have an announcement. The EPP group has notified the President of a decision relating to changes to appointments within committees. This decision will be set out in the minute of today's sitting and take effect of the date of this announcement. And the next item on the agenda is the report by Mr. Bonaccini, cooperation amongst enforcement authorities regarding unfair trading practices in the agri-food supply chain. And here I will start by giving the floor to the rapporteur. Please, Mr. Bonaccini, the floor is yours for 4 minutes.
1 year on